I will dispatch of you in 8 cycles. 300k might be unreachable for me. Domain expansion. Hellscape death sentence.
Blade got buffed, so it's time to discuss it. Honestly, it's a pretty good day to be a Blade main. These guys kind of been getting bullied for like 2 years for hitting like a pool noodle, and Blade finally getting an upgrade that he deserves is a really good thing. But honestly, like, before we get to his buffs, it's probably a good idea to take a good look at his current kit and see what problems he faced. Therefore, we can take a look at the buffs and see if these buffs actually fixed his issues or not. The first issue that Blade has, it's a really glaring issue. He's an HP scaling DPS, right? So just tell me why. Just why does he scale on attack? Like, come on, Hoyoverse, we made this mistake in Genshin Impact. There's a certain character that they released that scales off of attack and defense, and I'm pretty sure that character's like dead in a ditch right now. Secondly, as a 1.2 unit, let's keep it a buck, his multipliers are pretty bad. And as well, being a 1.2 unit, his Eidolons also suck. Like, just take a look at this E2.
Bruh.
15% crit rate is like, what, 3 relic substats or maybe 4 relic substats? I'm not too sure, but you can just get all of this from this getting super lucky on 1 relic. 180 pulls does not justify this crap. Now looking at his changes, the biggest one ever is that Blade no longer scales on attack, so having stats like HP percent rope will like benefit him a lot more than it did before. And now looking at his scaling, he did get a massive multiplier increase, which is a really big win for Blade mains. Look at his enhanced basic attack. For the primary target, he used to do 100% of its HP, and now he'll do 130% of its HP. That's like a 30% increase, and a 12% increase for the adjacent targets from 40 to 52. His ult has a 50% multiplier increase, and a 20% increase for the adjacent targets. Like, these are some pretty great multiplier buffs, and I'm really happy that he got these. And for his follow-up attack, he got like a smaller but very noticeable 20% multiplier increase, which is really good. And now moving on to his Eidolons, it's a little disappointing because let's just say his Eidolons still, suck. But at least we got a win with his E1. His E1 is much better than before, and now that he's a standard unit, this E1 is pretty decently obtainable for most of the player base. So if you have an E1, congratulations. You're gonna have a lot of fun with this character. Okay, so moving on to relics and light cones. First off with relics, his main relic piece will be the Longevous Disciple 4-piece set. This is pretty much his best in slot set, but if you for some reason don't have it, you can always use this 4-piece Scholar set. However, I really do think most players should have the 4-piece Longevous set because the set has been in the game since what, like 1.2? Almost launch, but like it's been there for a long time. So maybe you're farming the speed set and have a few Longevous Disciple pieces laying around that might have some good rolls on it. So yeah, just use those. Shouldn't be too much of an issue. And for 2-piece sets, his best sets will be the Bone Collector set. This farming for this set shouldn't be too bad because you probably have a Hyacine on your team, or you have to farm the other sets in that domain, and it's really efficient to farm for both characters at once. But if you have better stats on Ritalin Arena or Inert Salsodos, you can use those as well. For the stats, you want a crit percent body, crit rate or crit damage. If you have enough crit rate, you can use a crit damage, but mostly we're probably going to be using a crit rate chest here. For boots, you want speed boots, you need to hit that 134 breakpoint. And for rope, you need an HP rope, and orb will be wind damage. You can use an HP percent orb if you want, but I think wind damage slightly edges it out. And for substats, you need 134 speed, so you can go twice in a cycle. And your crit rate should be around 70 to 80% ideally. And then crit damage and HP are the remaining stats. For light cones, for his premium options, he only really has 2 options. My Day's Cone is his best in slot currently, especially if you have E1 or above. And if you already have Blade's Cone, that light cone will do just fine. I don't really recommend pulling My Day's light cone if you already own Blade's light cone because the difference is not that big. there's probably some better options to vertically invest into Blade than rolling for another light cone. As for 4-star light cones, you have the REACHABLE light cone, which is easily obtainable for any free-to-play, and if you don't have that, you can use Secret Vow. Moving on to his teams, he has two different playstyles. You can play him as a hyper carry team, and he will generally follow the same formula, where you have an action advancer and a general support, and lastly a sustain. For action advancers, you can use Sunday, Bronya, or Remembrance Trailblazer, whichever one is the most accessible to you. Sunday is the best one because his buffs can all be impactful towards Blade, whereas Bronya has an attack buff which Blade cannot really utilize. I prefer these two over RMC for the most part because they're able to action advance Blade more consistently, though Remembrance MC does have a really nice true damage buff, and if you're able to utilize that, it will do a lot of damage as well. For the support option, I recommend Tribi as the best support because the synergy between Tribi, Blade, and Hyacine is really good. Hyacine will buff both Blade and Tribi buffs both Blade and Hyacine. It's just a really nice DPS trio that just meshes really well together. But if you're an older player and have a Silverwolf lying around, Silverwolf after her buffs will do just fine. And lastly, for free-to-plays, Ruan Mei that you can get from the shop is a great third option. For sustains, there's no real competition. Hyacine is her best sustain, and there's just no one can compare to that. She has a lot of utility and a lot of good personal damage, so I really recommend playing Hyacine alongside Blade. And if you don't have her, Gallagher will just do fine. For dual DPS team comps, you can just pick a sub DPS between Jade, Cassius, and Jingliu. All three will drain Blade's HP. I find Jade to be the best, especially in AoE content. Like, the synergy just feels really nice to play, but Cassius does have a lot of damage, and she will kind of carry the team. I feel like Blade pulls more of his weight alongside Jade than Cassius, because Cassius just destroys everything. And lastly, you can use the good old Blade Jingliu comp, but I don't think it will do as well as using Jade or Castrus. Finally, I just want to shine some light on Hyacine. Hyacine is very, very, very important to Blade because she does so much for him. She is honestly the first HP percent based buffer that we have, and considering she's a sustain that can also buff HP, is really nice because she's kind of hitting multiple roles as in one character. So she not only heals Blade, but her signature light cone will also give Blade stacks, which allows him to release more follow-up attacks, greatly increasing his damage. And her personal damage is nothing to scoff at either. Little Ika can actually do a ton of damage and sometimes can even do more damage than Blade himself, which is really funny. They call this team comp with Hyacine and Tribi a wheelchair comp for a reason, as these supports just do a butt ton of damage. So if you have Hyacine, definitely use her with Blade, and if you don't have Hyacine, I highly recommend rolling a Hyacine copy to use with Blade. Hyacine is also great with other DPSs, so she's really flexible and obviously just a very good pull for the sustain slot in general. So now for vertical investments, Blade unfortunately doesn't have much to vertically invest on his own. For his best investment, I think I would get the E1 first, which you can honestly just obtain by just losing a 50-50, which is nice. And after the E1, you can either get his own light cone or My Day's light cone. If you're a battle pass buyer, I would just stick with his light cone as it's not too expensive to get. But if you do really like Blade, My Day's light cone is his best option, so that would be his next investment. Other than that, his Eidolons are kind of dookie until his E6. I don't think I really need to remind you guys about E2 again, but yeah, after that, his best personal upgrade would be E6, which makes his follow-up tally counter, whatever it's called, from 5 stacks to 4 stacks, allowing him to launch more follow-up attacks. His E6 is pretty nice. But other than that, after you get E1 S1 Blade, I think the best way to invest into him would just be investing in his supports like Hyacine and Tribi. Hyacine will be a mainstay support in Blade teams. I don't see her moving out of that team anytime soon, considering she is filling up the sustain slot, and she's buffing the HP and draining his HP. So she does a lot of things for Blade and is very comfortable to play being a sustain. So getting Hyacine E1, S1 is probably my next move to vertically invest into Blade. And after that, Shabby does have a really, really, really nice E1 upgrade. So just upgrading Hyacine and Shabby a little bit after you upgrade Blade will be the best way to go about investing vertically on this team. So my final review about Blade, his changes are overall great. Remember, this guy is a standard character, and the amount of value that you get from a standard character is really nice. His his buffs almost solved all of his issues as a character. My only gripe is just his vertical investments, like into Blade himself, not his supports, but just Blade, is a little lackluster. His light cone is no longer his undisputed best in slot, as Maide's light cone is now better, and his Eidolons are now, well, you know the gist by now. Other than that, Blade's damage output should significantly increase after the buffs, and he has multiple teams that can support him with the addition of Hyacine and Tribby into the game. However, if you don't have these two supports in the game, Blade's numbers will definitely take a significant hit, and his team won't feel as fluid as they would with them. So I guess he is a little expensive in that regard, but keep in mind that this guy is a free character now. But yeah, if you surround him with Hyacine and Tribby, he will perform and will be able to easily clear all three endgame modes without too much issue. For a standard character, this is insane value, and it gives the players a lot of options when it comes to investing into him. So honestly, really solid buffs here. But again, if you are not a Blade fan, I don't really recommend pulling on his banner in particular. If you want to build him from losing a 50-50, that is a great idea, but I think the 3.x DPSs are much better and the future DPSs are also better. But he is still a very, very solid option, and I think that's a great place to be.